Good evening. My name is Ryan Curley. I'm the first selectman of Portland, Connecticut, and the time is 6:37 p.m. and I will now call to order this special meeting of the Board of Selectmen and Board of Education. Before we get started with the agenda, I do just want to provide an update. We're a little late this evening because there was a juvenile male was hit by a motor vehicle on Main Street in front of Millilli's Cafe. And that it was 14 years old. He was transported to Connecticut Children's Medical Center. I am told he was alert upon traveling to CMC or CCMC, and so certainly our thoughts and prayers are with him and his family as he recovers. So please keep this juvenile in your thoughts. With that, we will move on. So the first item of business on the agenda this evening is a board discussion among both boards on the school facilities plan that was presented at our last meeting, the last joint meeting, by Dr. Britton and the architects from Friar Architecture who are here with us this evening. So if you recall, at that meeting, there was a lot of information that was provided to the boards and the public at that time, and I think it was in everyone's best interest for both of our boards to digest that presentation. There was a lot of things in the mix. And so here we are. I think everyone's had time to review, ask questions, and today we'll continue that conversation of where we left off at that meeting. So with that, does anyone want to go first? It's open to any Board of Education or Board of Selectmen member.
I'll make a quick comment here, because everybody is concerned about the number. So I talked to Dr. Britton there, and I did some calculations on my end. Somebody can tell me if I'm wrong, but I know we're looking at the 44 million. However, we're not putting in the soft cost of 17 in the architecture firm. So generally, it's about 13 million, and generally those are covered. So if you do a calculation at the 49%, or excuse me, at the 45%, that's 36 million. And if we actually get to 49%, which Dr. Britton thinks is a strong possibility, we could be at 34 million. That's a little over a 22% reduction on what we're looking at. I know we have to plan for the worst case scenario, but there's also a more likelihood scenario that it could be in that 34 to 36. And then in addition to that, Dr. Britton can comment on this, he's exploring some open choice and pre-K bonus percentage of the state technically sometimes awards for doing something of this nature, because we are very open choice oriented and we are going to put a separate pre-K. So again, everybody, including myself, is concerned about the number, but I want to start with that comment that, and then we spur some conversation.
I do have an update on that. We've done our homework. Stephanie, do you want to come up, and maybe Bryce and Mike, when you talk too, that maybe use the microphone here. So Stephanie has reached out to the state, and we can talk to one that pre-K we're not eligible for, according to Stephanie, because we're not identified as a priority district, but the open choice we are, and how that's calculated.
So the pre-K one, it's not the priority piece, it's that we don't offer full day.
Okay.
It has to be a full day program, we have to apply for it through a special grant, and then if you're awarded, then you can be part of that pre-K piece. The open choice piece is based off of when your submission is done and you open your school, what your population of open choice students in that school versus the number of students in it. So I took a picture of where we are right now. So in the K-5 structure, we have 23 open choice students out of 600. So when you divide that, it's 4.6%. So we would get an additional 4.6% reimbursement because we have open choice students. And it's up to 10%. I don't think we'd ever get close to that, but if we had between 20 to 25 students in a 600 student school, we'd probably be in the 4 to 5% additional reimbursement. And the gentleman I spoke to, he was from CREC, he said, make sure you keep reminding the state that you are an open choice district, because they, not that they don't promote it, but they want, you have to push them and let them know that you have that and that you're seeking that extra additional reimbursement, because they don't really tell you about it. And we read it in the document, and I don't know if that's what you've seen in what you've, in other projects you've done, but I spoke to the gentleman who just did Ellington, and now he works at CREC. So he was very helpful in figuring it out.
So Stephanie, our reimbursement rate this year is 49%, right?
Right.
So that would be 4% on top of the 49%. So if it were this year, it would be 53%?
Yes, and he said it comes at the end of the project. So I don't know how the rest of the reimbursement goes, but he goes, that's at the end piece of it, that you would get that additional.
Right, and we won't know our reimbursement rate until July 1, but this year it's 49%, and based on this homework, if we had done all this year, it would be the 49% plus the eligibility for the 4% at the end.
Correct.
And then, of course, we'll know that new number July 1. And then, we try to keep our open choice number at 5%. That's always our target, because that's just generally been where we try to be, because we get the added incentives for there. So I agree with Stephanie that 3 to 5% is a good range, and this year at 4.6 sounds like we've hit our numbers.
Yeah, it's got to be in the configuration of the K-5 school, so how many that are in that grade level. So, that's it.
Yeah, so at the 45%, where I said, hey, if we're at the 49, it'll be 34, that would probably get us to the 49 guaranteed. So we'd probably looking at 34 million versus 44 million. In an ideal case scenario, not a worst case scenario, not a best case scenario, but probably a middle of the road scenario. And if anyone wants to shoot holes in that, I'm not the expert, so, but that makes sense to me.
Mike, I'm seeing thumbs up from Mike. That's been your experience.
It's all correct. It's complex. We didn't use the cut. I'm glad you did the research. That's all correct, and it's complicated and it's hard to put that into the calculation this early. So going on the conservative side is a good approach, but I think you're going to land in a much better spot, which is something that I have been saying.
Yeah, so Mike, the one question I know that everybody will want answered, you and I have spoken about this. So to submit the grant by June 30th, we would need the approved ed specs plan, and because it's the presidential election, it's every 4 years, we get the dispensation where we can apply for the grant prior to a approved bonding measure. Of course, if we applied for the grant and the bond didn't pass, the referendum didn't pass in November, we'd be back to square one and have to start over, and then we would have to do it in reverse, right? Have the bonding. But the question I have for you is, if the Board of Selectmen passes what we need, Appendix B of the grant application, Appendix A being the approved ed specs plan, the number that has to go on the question, that's something that's negotiated with bond counsel, correct? You'd have to go back and forth to figure out what number goes on the question.
That's correct. The number that goes on the question is you have to go for the full amount, as if you were going to get reimbursed zero. But you write in the question with an anticipated reimbursement of, and then that is something you will talk to bond counsel and find out where you want that number to be. Because anticipated means all of these complex numbers all get thrown into the mix, so you'll be on the conservative side of that.
Right. So the question would be the $66,126,000 with the anticipated reimbursement. You used 45% as a conservative place, but that 45% that would have to come out as part of a negotiation and approval or input from a bond counsel.
Yeah, it's not necessarily an approval. That's really up to you, but they're going to give you a final recommendation of what the language says so that it meets the state election commission's requirements, right? But the legislation says you have to be on the hook for the whole thing, so that's what it's going to say. But you can write in that piece what you believe your reimbursement is going to be, which we have a lot of experience at this point on an educated guess.
Can I ask another procedural question about that? In terms of the action that the Board of Selectmen would need to take to send a question to referendum, if they do they put forward a question that has actual numbers in it that they vote on, and then what if July, if they have to do that before this June 30th deadline, but then in July we find out that our reimbursement rate is different than the 45%? Can that question be amended?
I don't believe it can be. I think once you move to referendum, that's the question that goes on.
Even if you
I'm
get
not 100%
additional-
sure on that, but
Okay.
yeah.
We would have to check with bond counsel
Yeah.
on that question,
Yeah.
which we can. It's a great question.
Yeah. Okay.
So just to clarify, and that's great news on the additional open choice reimbursement, but I don't think it would impact what the town bonds though, would it? It would just be, we would still have to bond and anticipate bonding 44 million. So as far as a mill rate impact and impact to the taxpayers, until we get reimbursed, it would still be 44 million, correct?
Well, you're gonna be taking out a whole series of short-term bonds over time. So it's not just, you're not gonna borrow the whole 44 million on the day you pass referendum and then start dishing money out. The way the grant works is you'll get money for your cash flow, and then every 2 months during the construction phase, you apply for reimbursement, you get a check coming in. So you're going to be taking a series of short-term bonds, and at the very, very end, there's going to be a pencils down period of a couple of years. Well, it's going to be about 5 years, where the state is preparing for audit and then goes through the audit, and then there's going to be a last final negotiated number, and you'll either get money back or you're going to bond a little bit more at the end, and then you'll have the whole thing complete. So it's going to be a bell curve on your borrowing.
Mm-hmm. I'm just thinking of the impact to the taxpayers. That's all.
Yeah.
As far as the time period, so it's still we would get monies back at some point.
Yep.
Okay.
Just if you could stay up there just 1 second, I'm going to have a question for you.
It's at your pleasure.
Okay. So when Dr. Britton met with the Board of Selectmen with his facilities committee town hall, he said one of the main things for the parents and teachers and the educators wanted in Portland was the safety of the children. Right? Is that still true? Okay. So now Dave Murphy talks to us that we might be able to get some more money back to us from the state, so this $44 million number might go down. Correct? Am I hearing that right? Why can't we cut costs to the construction of this building in order to bring this price down even further? One of the questions I have is, why do we have a second floor? You show that there's room out back for further expansion. Why wouldn't we just put the second floor, the square footage that we're going to use for the second floor, out to the back and have the second and third grade kids there, when I remember a few years back there was an issue about sending second and third grade kids to the biz because of the stairs. By doing so, you're going to save some money on the stairwells, you're going to save some money on the elevator, because we're not going to need those. I'm just looking at, there's other ways we can save money by just waiting for percentages off on reimbursement. Another question I have is, by looking at these drawings, and when I go into the middle school, it kind of sticks out in my head. What is the finished ceiling height in the hallways and classrooms? What is the finished ceiling height in the foyer of this conceptual drawing, which you're doing a lot of work coming up with numbers off of this drawing. So in my experience watching things go from conception, especially anything that's municipal or government, it usually is right around the same drawing. Do you have the answer to those two questions on ceiling height?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
So, let me start with the first one. 2 stories isn't necessarily more expensive than a single story. There's an efficiency to stacking stories because you're not pouring foundations.
Right.
So a 2-story is an efficient way to build a school. And to address the grade levels, you can't have kindergartners or first graders at the 2nd story without them having their own stairwell, but you can have 2nd and 3rd graders on the 2nd story. That's not against any building code.
I'm not saying it was. It was, in this town, it was an issue.
Okay, not
All right.
Wasn't aware.
But I understand that there is probably a wash.
Mhm.
Maybe not, because now your HVAC system is going to be different, going to a 2nd floor for 6 classrooms and 2 bathrooms, 4 whatever it is. Your fire protection, right? So I understand stacking, I get that.
Yep.
But we're not building a full 8-foot foundation underneath either.
Correct.
So the amount of concrete you're going to be, it's probably close to a wash.
If we were to the point where we were designing a building that was exactly this building, and the cost estimates came in over, I don't believe what we would be doing is turning that 2nd story into a spread out single story building to save money. We might, however, lower the ceiling heights. That is a place where there's potentially money. In general, we try to start at a 10-foot ceiling height, and with the modern HVAC equipment and the amount of air changes that we're required to have in this modern setting, where essentially we're sealing the building, the windows don't operate, and that's for energy reasons.
Right.
We need a pretty good amount of above ceiling space for the modern ductwork. So while we're going to try to get 10 feet of ceiling height, especially for some of these bigger spaces, if it ends up at 9 foot, 9'6", we're basing things on masonry height, masonry coursing, and things like that.
Right.
So if we could knock a couple of courses off, if we're in the design mode and we need to knock some money off, that's when we start doing the value engineering pieces, which is kind of what you're talking about now. But I wouldn't necessarily base a budget on value engineering. I would value engineer if we didn't meet the budget.
Well, when you have some discrepancy in the number we have right here,
Okay.
with what we came up with, a number that we sent out in the survey, and you're getting the phone calls or getting stopped about where we are with this number, then I think we need to do some value engineering. And it's just how I feel, and I think there's people in here that, somebody asked me today, are you against this plan? Because there's a lot of people that don't want the so-called mega school. This is what it became now, it's called the mega school. And I told them, I'm not necessarily against this plan, but I am against the numbers. And I think there's a way we can save some money on this school.
Can I tag on?
Yes.
This kind of goes along with you too, Dave. I appreciate the efforts trying to keep the cost down as much as possible, but one of the screens in your presentation, Charles, about the secondary schools, during that presentation it gave me agita, because you're talking about an additional $11 million needed for the secondary school repair, and I know we're talking about the elementary school, but from my perspective, and I've had a lot of discussions with folks too, they're concerned about the mega school, but they're also concerned about increasing taxes. And we're talking about bonding money, but we're just talking about passing on that 11 million, worried about it later. When we're talking about potentially a 30-year bond on this school and repairs that need to be done at the secondary school within 10. So do we have any calculations as to what the additional bond cost to taxpayers will be? Not necessarily in a year or two, but at some point down the road, because my fear is you're only going to get one bite at the apple. We may push real hard to get folks to agree with this project, but then if we approach them again a few years down the road for an additional 4, 5, 6, 8 million, whatever it turns out to be, with our state reimbursement, I don't know if people are going to be as willing to pay that again. you know, and I know that there was a question up front whether we build it all together and bond it all at once or not. But I know that's gonna put the price astronomically higher. But at some point, that cost is gonna have to hit the taxpayers while they're still paying off the 30 years on the new Valley View. So is there any discussion on your thoughts about the bonding of that extra piece?
The only recommendation I included right now is that for one more year, we have the 50% reimbursement of the HVAC, right? So that we do need to work on the indoor air quality here because it's the one pipe and not the two pipe system. And if we replaced all of the air handling units and put in the deionization system, and Bob's here, we've spoken with some vendors and we know that's about $1.5 million worth of work. By putting in $750,000, we would leverage $750,000 and get that whole project done, which would knock substantially that $11 million down. But you're right that there sightlines and fire identified in this building other significant work that's going to need to be done. That's a reality.
We need to be transparent.
Right.
I mean, the amount that even if it isn't part of it now, people need to understand the whole story and what we're going to be coming back again.
Yeah, and what's really hard in my mind, and there's so many unknowns, like the reimbursement rate, the open choice, the borrowing in increments, and Mike even said it. We won't know for sure until 5 years later when the final audit is done how much is happening. Like that's scary. I get it, but also have to factor in addition to those speculations but unknowns, we have to consider. Well, what's the impact of the bonding coming off in August 2025 of this building? Your park bonding is going to come off in what?
Well, that's why I was asking the question.
Right?
I mean, what do you anticipate with those bonds coming on, those bonds coming off?
So bonds are going to be
what
coming.
the impact will be?
Yeah, bonds are going to be coming on. Bonds are going to be coming off. In addition, interest rates are high now. Is there an opportunity to refinance in the future? And once we do this 4 years from now, realizing the impact of those savings in overhead from the staff reductions and cutting down. And of course, what's happening at the other buildings. And of course, what's going to happen when the tax abatement at Brainerd Place comes off and the Nordic Spa comes on, right? There are so many things happening in Portland right now, all of which are very exciting and are incredible opportunities that I don't know that it's smart to say, let's ask for the $11 million for the high school now too. That's why my recommendation was, let's focus on the elementary schools. If we were going to do anything for the high school, let's tackle this HVAC system while the 50% reimbursement is on the table. Then get going down this road, like to move down this road and see tax abatement, retiring of bonding for the high school, retiring of bonding for the park, Nordic Spa, other things coming on, interest rates, how those are going to adjust over the next 5 to 10 years, so that we're not biting off more than we can chew immediately, but recognizing that you're absolutely right. Over the next 10 years, this building will need work because we know that from sightlines, we know that.
One of the other things we talked about is when we're having to have this savings, let's call it $700,000. Like you guys already take $50,000 every year in your budget and put it open space. We should be putting a chunk of change every year in our budget for capital expenses, $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, whatever that number is, and anticipating these things. So in 20 years, we're not looking for another $20 million to fix this building. So we need to get ahead of that curve, and I think the savings on the consolidation is going to be a big step towards that. That's my only thought.
I just want to bring up one more thing that we have to think about is what are we going to do? I know there's a committee. We're looking at these buildings. We just had another tour today with a developer to look at the buildings with one of the members on the commission. But this is something that, we have to look at because at this point, we don't know what we're going to do with them. It's going to be close to 5, 6, 7 years before we're able to do anything with them. We can't just dismiss that those buildings are off the BOE into the BOS because like we did with Central School and like we've done with other buildings in town, we do not have a great track record. That's why we have this commission, but it's something we have to look at because if we aren't able to do anything right away after you take ownership of the new school and those are left to the town, then we have to figure out, okay, what's it gonna cost a year to mothball these without them falling apart? So just keep that in the back of your mind. That's another expense.
I agree with you, I'm on that committee.
I know.
But the reality is you're not gonna have any decision by 36 weeks from now, we need to make a decision.
I
We've got to move
understand
forward
that.
as a town, but the positive part of this is every developer and special ed school, people that have come through there, have always said good things, positives, possibilities. Nobody said, Albatross, you got a problem on your hands here, you won't be able to deal with. Everybody said there's options, there's many
Right.
options. And maybe we make no money, we end up, or we make a little bit of money, but there's options, and that's about all we're gonna come through with on this committee to make this.
No, I understand that,
And
Dave.
the second point is.
But we have to keep that in mind because we had central schools that for 20 years and we were told the same thing. There was options on
And
it.
yeah, I think, I let.
We live next to it. We live next to that,
Most
all
of my
right?
neighbors are newer to this town, they have no idea like me, I have no idea about that school, I could
Right.
care less, so.
Well, I hate to say it because we only not only did that, we did that with the old firehouse down on Main Street that the police department took over. We did that to the old senior center. You want us to keep,
We have a problem with $30 million worth of work that needs to be
Right.
addressed.
But the problem, part of the problem is that the savings that you're identifying have to do with not having to pay for those buildings anymore. That's one of them, and, you know, and that's been a fear of mine. You know, you guys have been listening to me for weeks. I said, when that survey result came out, I did like everybody else did. I went right to the page with the pie charts to see what everybody chose. But every survey gives you a lot of data. And the other question that really stuck out in my brain was the 80+% of folks that wanted to know, what are you doing with this and Gildersleeve before I go to the polls? And there certainly has always, we know, anybody that's lived in this town for a while knows that there is a love for that historic building on Main Street. There's always going to be there. Even if we mothball these buildings, or we do something with it, we retain one of them, we retain both of them, some of the costs that you calculated in savings goes away.
A smaller percentage of it, because the vast majority of it is personnel costs. But
Yeah.
yeah, about 200,000 was estimated as operational costs.
Because I mean,
Yes.
I literally heard a noise many years ago on a snowy night and looked out my kitchen window and saw the roof of Central School collapse.
Yeah.
Because that building, they shut the heat off, the floors were warped, they boarded up the windows from the inside.
Yeah.
So all the rain went right inside the building. It was just a really bad scene.
So, but
And
John,
we just, that's what we're saying, we don't want to recreate that.
100%, and I guess what I would say in response to that is that I think we've learned from that lesson, hopefully, and had the wisdom now ahead of time to formulate to put together a committee to be working towards solutions,
Right.
so that by the time we get to referendum in November, there are some very good plausible options, not just like we could,
Right.
but like,
Right.
hey, we've
But
explored
there-
these, and the professionals and the experts who have a lot of expertise in this industry have looked at these and agree that these 2 or 3 things are distinct possibilities, right? Not just a maybe, but like a here we are.
Let me just jump in because I think these are all great points, and I think for the sake of transparency, we have some very talented people on this committee working very hard. They, to date, don't have any answers for us yet, and I'm starting to see why Central School may have sat for so long. Because these are not easy answers on what you do with the school. So we found out with Friar Architecture that the demolishing Gildersleeve is estimated to cost us $4 million, which is more than the land itself is worth. So selling that is not an option. It's not, we're flipped. So basically we're stuck with the building. And so what we've been finding out, and the same with Brownstone, is if the town were to retain ownership, well then the town would have to update, maintain the building, and there would be costs associated with that on the town side. Now we could sell the building, but we would be selling it to a developer who would most likely be putting apartments there. And those apartments, just to do that, would cost a lot of infrastructure. And most likely, the developer would be seeking a tax abatement from the town, which also we know is a very popular topic these days. and so these are real hurdles that we have a committee of very talented people working on. They don't have an answer yet, but it is scary because from what we're gathering, a win on these properties is breaking even, and that would be selling the properties. And so if the town were to keep Brownstone, there would be an extra expense. So I just want people to be aware of that. I'm not saying that we can't do it. I'm not saying we can do either or, but it's just those buildings are very difficult and they're challenging. And I encourage anyone here to attend our meetings of the facilities, the Building Usage Facilities Committee. I think the next meeting is Monday, the 18th. And they're all also online as well, so you can watch them. But they're doing great work, and I joke with them that I put them on one of the hardest. We put them on one of the hardest committees, but it's not easy. So that's just something to think about, because I wish I could say there was an easy answer on what to do with Brownstone or what to do with Gildersleeve, but the truth is there really isn't. And I have a feeling 30, 40 years ago, people in town were probably wondering what they were going to do with Central School and then just mothballed it. And we don't want to do that. I know no one in this room wants to do that. So if anyone has any ideas, I'm all ears, please.
Please
I have an idea.
as negative. I just want to make sure that we're looking at the big picture.
But I think the thing is we've done 5 years of this research, and we've narrowed it down, we've talked about it, we've got architects, we've got engineers, we've got studies, we've got 2 studies, we've got a survey. It's bringing us down a path. Will all the questions be answered? Absolutely not. Will we have all the answers? No, but we're on a path that you guys say, well, we don't have to go on that path, but we don't. We'll just live with the schools the way they are and just move on.
I don't think anyone's saying we don't have to go down that path, Dave, but I think some of us are saying that maybe there's a way we can go down that path up on High Street without spending as much money.
I mean,
That's all I'm
architects
saying.
that do this for a living. How many schools have you done? Dozens of schools.
Right.
They give you an estimate. It's probably high because they put in inflated costs because of inflation and everything. So it's worst case scenario.
All I'm saying, Dave, is a box with windows, heat, AC, that's secure, will work just as well as a Taj Mahal.
Not the Taj Mahal.
But if I can interject, I just want to go back to if somebody has, and maybe this is too late to go backwards on this, but to me, in my mind, the sticking point has been passing these properties to the town and making it all, just the district's responsibility that the town pays for anyway, or the town. And have we gone too far by trying to replace Brownstone? Why not just use it what it was always intended for, as a school, and not have this burden of trying to figure out what we're going to do with Brownstone? Because that is the piano hanging by the wire over the doorway. It's like, how do you get
Spend ungodly amount of money
Well,
to
it's
please
yeah.
the aesthetics of the
We have too much space at Brownstone, which means that the town would take over some part of it.
But the town's going to have to pay. I mean, you can make all those arguments, but the fact is, we're dropping it in the lap of the town anyway. Or we keep it on the books of the school district and we pay whatever it costs to maintain it. That's, and just to put it in.
Can I make one comment about that too?
But if I can finish just the one thought is, to me it goes back to the 700 plus student school that we're replacing these 2 buildings with. And is that really the wisest option for educating our students? I've talked to a lot of teachers, a lot of educators, some in this room, who have said that that's just a bridge too far. We shouldn't be, it's just too big a school.
Can we pause for just a second? Because I feel like every time this gets talked about, the number of students gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It's not going to be a 700 person's school. If you're basing it on current enrollment numbers, pre-K through 5, it would be 570 something.
I think we have to project out.
So we do have to project out. And our 10-year enrollment study is projecting maybe 5%, maybe less.
I think
So
it's
that
more.
puts us in the 600 student range.
648. That was the highest number we used.
648 is the high, right?
Was the high
That's the-
projecting for
That was one of my questions tonight, thank you.
So I just to clarify that the numbers. So sorry.
Wait, and can I clarify that? You said 648. Did I read somewhere 648 plus 40 pre-K? Or was that 40 pre-K included in the 648? Okay, thank you.
Enjoy the lively conversation. I just wanted to inject a couple of points.
Please.
On the cost of the building. So there's still controls that the town has on the numbers that we presented. We're presenting what we believe is the best budget to build this building. And you value engineer an estimate, you don't value engineer a budget. So I'm giving you a budget. The budget doesn't mean you spend the whole budget. The budget means that you're forming a building committee, you're designing your building, and when you get the design of the building, it gets estimated. And so now you're counting doorknobs, you're counting bricks, you're counting ceiling tiles, you're counting ceiling heights. That's the time when you try not to spend the money. But if you try to lowball it now before you go in, you could get yourself into a little bit of trouble. And so I just wanted to make that point, and I'm not trying to be argumentative. I think that we have given you a budget that is a reasonable budget. It's not an excessive budget. It's what the standard box schools are going for right now.
Per square foot, per person.
Yeah,
Per
yeah.
pupil.
So we try to get the best value for your dollar that's going up by getting you the maximum reimbursement that we believe. So I think we're giving you guys some pretty good advice. The best advice that I believe I can give.
So a square foot commercial now probably between $600-700.
Yeah, it's a little bit higher right now. Material prices went up. Everything that you're going to build here is going to be prevailing wage work. So that gets factored in as well. And we do have contingencies on top of the numbers for escalation, which is a projection.
Right.
So this is a budget, and I don't want you to
No,
confuse it with an estimate. So you're going to get to a point where you're going to have a building committee overseeing the design, and you're going to have actual estimates that you can itemize. And we did a pretty deep dive and kind of assuming what this was going to be, but that's why we have contingencies at this point. So I think we're giving you the best numbers that we think we can. And one suggestion on the Gildersleeve project, that is an expensive demolition, and it's because there's, the year it was built, they were using questionable materials that we don't use anymore. Why watching it? But I don't know, but it's always worth the ask for since you guys are consolidating schools and you're not growing schools, this is one of the things that they really want to see. It might be worth the ask to say, hey, we're not going to charge this project swing space, which is a big cost to a lot of projects that we put out there nowadays. They've got the town, many towns have a school, and they need to renovate the building. They're not going to build new, they're going to renovate the building. So we have to spend, $5 million to get the kids into portable classrooms, do the work, and move them out. That's not money you guys have to spend. You guys are getting a really good deal here. So because of that, it might be worth the ask to say, hey, as part of our project, can we include the demolition of our swing space, Gildersleeve? You might be, it's not something that they'll give you, but it might be something you can ask.
And we talked about this, it might also necessitate involving our state reps
Right.
and asking for some special legislation similar to what we did with the truck.
Doesn't hurt to ask.
I have two questions. The current proposal, is there a reason why the building wasn't just made 2 stories instead of having the whole wing built to the side?
The new construction is 2 stories on the west side, that 2-story piece. The other piece, we tried to save as much construction as we could. We did remove the library and made it wider. We didn't build on top of any existing structure because that gets complicated, and complexity costs money. So we tried to we took down that one wing, which is going to come down really easy. New foundations, 2-story building, simple construction, and then the other side, we made it a little bit wider. We thought that was an efficient use of the existing construction.
My next question on what's existing now, what's going to be renovated. Is there a reason that they stayed with a flat roof and not a gable roof? Because all we have is problems with flat roofs.
So we put a pitched roof on the new 2-story wing so that we could get mechanical equipment up there. The answer is I just haven't work through the actual final architecture of that, that could very well be a pitched roof if that's something that you wanted to add to the.
No matter how old our schools are, we always have a problem
Yep.
with a flat roof.
Yep. Understood.
So I was just wondering if that would be smarter to do it now, and then the whole school would have a gabled or sloped roof, and we wouldn't have water problems.
Can we ask Bob what he thinks of that?
Yeah, that's when we're doing the value engineering piece of the.
So, Ryan, just to say really quick, the tour today is excellent. I think that.
Bob, do you mind coming up to the podium? Sorry.
You talk about the tours that are taking place. And that was part of all of them. So today's tour that was held for the schools, I don't know his name, but the developer who has 40 years experience, and he's worked not only in this state but many other states. He'll be at your next meeting, and I think that he's going to bring an awful lot to the table to help the committee with both of the schools, and really what they can be used for, and really what there's no market for at all. So, I mean, I was hoping that he could sell Brainerd Place too, but he was that good. But I'm hoping that he'll bring some really good information to this group, this committee that's working on that's going to help you move forward with some really good options, I think. So it was the best one that I've been part of. So hopefully that's good news coming forward for your next meeting.
Yeah, it's great news. Thank you, Don. Yeah, and I just wanted to mention that as a challenge that we're experiencing, not to disparage the plans that we're talking about, but just to highlight that there are hurdles that we're going to have to overcome. And I think it's just important to be transparent, open, and honest about the challenges with decommissioning two schools and what that would present to the town. That's all from that. So I do want to say though, we're all here because of a survey that was put out to the town. I think it's important that we also remember that we're here because this is the direction that the townspeople told us they wanted to explore. And while we're just discussing that, I know there's been some pushback on the survey, on the fact that anyone could fill out the survey. And that's true. It was a very long survey, so anyone would have to have a lot of time on their hands to do so. And so one of the things, and I think I had mentioned this previously, but I think it's worth noting and it's worth stating again. So Great Blue Research was the company that we used. They're a professional surveying company. They do this for a living. They're very good at what they do. One of the things that I asked them to do after the survey was completed and presented to us was, the survey was anonymous. However, in the survey, all respondents had the option to sign up for the town email mailing list if they choose to do so. So as an added security measure to double check, I reached out to Seamus with Great Blue and I said, could you just send me the results of, and of course it was still anonymous, but only the people who responded that put an actual email address, because that way we'll know that they're real people, and that would take away another layer of potential spamming the survey or something. And so out of the 1,000, and it was 1,000 that we had, 467 people put their real email address. So out of that, it was the numbers were even more stark as far as a one school option. It was the one school option in a whole was 49.9%, with decommissioning just Gildersleeve at 22.3%, and then capital improvements were at 22.5%. So, I mean, that's why we're here, is because the town told us that they wanted a one school option. Now, there's plenty of challenges with that, and that's why we're all here talking about it. But I did want to put kind of to rest some of the speculation on the survey, because it was conducted professionally. These numbers are accurate, but also I also want to note that when asked whether or not the individual supported each individual plan by itself, support rose for the decommissioned Gildersleeve to 49.7%. So that went, I think it was in the high 30s. It went up about 10 points. and support for capital improvements went up about a point. So it was pretty close. But it just seems like the decommissioned to school option was the preferential choice based on the survey. And the survey, I think we can tell, was pretty fair and accurate. So I just want to put that on the record.
Right, and I'll follow up on that. My thought on this is, so 1,000 people filled out the survey. It's representative of the town. We know there's going to be a higher turnout at the elections in November. So I think it behooves us as elected representatives of the town to approve the Ed Specs plan for Board of Ed and send it to referendum for Board of Selectmen, because then you're putting it out to the residents who get to vote. And if that survey wasn't representative, well, then it'll come out at the election. But if we never send it to referendum, then we really don't know. And I think we probably have done a disservice to the people who voted for us to represent them, to let them speak for what their wish is for this.
Well, I think that's why when the numbers came out and we had discussion on the board, we said we have to do what the majority wanted of the survey.
Yeah.
And that was to, accept this depending on what the Board of Education does. And I think the other thing too, we just have to really, one thing that we've talked about and discussed amongst us, and it's been on the YouTube and all our meetings, is we've always made it clear that if it made sense for the town, we would support it. Meaning every single person that lives in town paying taxes, does it make sense for them? Does it make sense for business owners that have property in town that pay a lot in property taxes that don't live in town? Does it make sense for them? Because it's a lot of money when you're focusing on one thing, and it's not like if we're running a water main or sewer main. So I mean, there's a lot that goes to it, but you're right. We have to do what the survey says, as far as I'm concerned.
Can I jump on real quick? I do appreciate that we are taking the town's input. I've tried to come up with a good analogy, and I don't have one. Looking at you, maybe a firehouse is a good analogy. Asking the townspeople for their input about, should we close 3 firehouses? Should we keep 2 open? I appreciate that people have a vested interest from a financial standpoint. However, they don't understand the ins and outs and the inner workings of a school and what that means in the day-to-day life of the students. I'm listening for almost an hour. I've heard talk about money. I've heard talk about ceiling heights. The students is what we are about. And that's where I come at this from. And I'm very passionate about it. On Sunday, I drove past a school in Prospect, and I said, holy cow, it's that elementary school. I said, wow, that is a huge school. Did a quick look up on my phone thinking it's got to be like 1,000 students. It was 600 is what it had said on it. I'm like, wow, that's what a school of 600 needs to look like to hold that many students. I feel like the renderings of what we're seeing isn't necessarily what it's going to look like in the end. I have many, many concerns. I don't think this is what's best for students. I understand we're going down this road. It's like the time I took 2 1-year-olds and a 3-year-old on a whale watch. The whole time I kept going, is this a good idea? Is this a good idea? The captain's not going to let us get on the boat. Oh my gosh, he's letting us on the boat. Okay. And it's something I'll never do again. And I'm just worried that are we doing what is best for kids at the end of the day? Best for the staff, best for everybody. If you keep layering on, making compromises, okay, 2nd and 3rd grade have to go upstairs because that's the best way to work. But we know it's not the best option for 2nd and 3rd graders. It'd be much better to have 4th and 5th upstairs. But that won't work because we're having to fit a square peg in a round hole. And that is my concern at the end of the day. I have 2 pages of notes that I could talk about. The location of pre-K being so close to the road, talking about having their own drop-off pickup with exit doors. So now we're worried about elopement right near High Street. I could go on. So for me, this is a hard no. I understand if, we've already opened the gate and it's too late to turn back, but I think we need to take a hard look, and that's my stance on it.
Yeah, you make some valid points, but I got to remind you that for every person that thinks we shouldn't do this, there's probably 2 people that think we should. So
And are
just
they
like the budget
educators?
referendum,
Is that-
just like the budget referendum we had, there's people that were against it, there's people that are for it. We have to go by democracy rules. Best
Well,
thing
that's
for
what we'll
the
find
town.
out in November.
Well, that's, yeah.
If we could vote.
When we actually vote.
I agree with what Sean says. I agree with what Kim says. I might not like this whole idea, but I'm gonna vote for it to move forward and have the public have their say. I mean, just because, you know, they voted us and put us here, I don't know what each person that voted for me wants.
Yeah.
So that's their chance. And in November, we find out whether they like it or they don't like it.
Yeah. I agree with that. 'Cause I bring this up all the time. Is that, you know, we did the brownstone property purchase, we did the park, we did the budget. You know, a lot of people disagree. I disagreed on 2 or 3 of those.
But as long
I
as they
still
all
won,
understand,
and I moved on to the
then we
town
can't complain about it.
because the town made a decision and I move on.
But one thing that Kim said that, you know, a lot of people probably don't, she drove by a school with 600 kids in it and realizes how big that school is. My granddaughter goes to school, K through 8, a charter school in Franklin, Mass. It's built in an industrial park. You wouldn't know it when you get to the school that it's built in an industrial park. It was the cheapest piece of property they could find to build on so they could build this school. But it's massive. And if it was in a neighborhood, I don't think, you know, the people would really enjoy it.
I spent a whole day in a school that size for a junior achievement event a year ago, and I didn't even notice the kids in the school because it was spaced so well that you in your own little section.
I'm talking about the people on Myrtle Road now looking out their back window seeing the property taken. That's what I'm looking at. There's all angles.
Everybody, unfortunately, no.
No, and that's why I say just let them vote on it. And
Yeah.
Mike, I know you've built several schools, including one that we went and visited in South Windsor. Can you comment on what this school will look like, the size of it, how you envisioned the pre-K pickup, the fencing and security we have in place to make sure our pre-K kids don't get in the road, and how the ed specs would be reflected in this, and you know, give us a sense.
Sure. So we just completed in the last 6 or 7 years 2 schools at about this size in Waterbury, Connecticut. So if you want to get a feel for the aesthetic and for the size of the building for this many students, Carrington Elementary School and Wendell Cross Elementary School, both in Waterbury, Connecticut, on challenging hilly sites. That's actually more challenging in Waterbury than here because everything is pretty steep. So that'll give you an idea of the size of the buildings. And what we learned in those buildings is that we designed the buildings so that it felt like it was separated by smaller, you know, so there's a pre-K area, there's a middle school there, a school that feels for older kids, and intermediate area of the building. And so that's kind of the way we looked at this, to kind of break down the scale of the building. It's possible when you went to visit that other school that they converted an old middle school or an old high school to an elementary school. You see that a lot. We chose to scale the building so that it feels residential. It feels more like a home. The pitched roofs, the small windows, the low area. We did recognize that where we located the pre-K was close to the road. For the clarity of the rendering, we didn't put in the fencing, but we envisioned having a nice fence around that section so that the kids, you know, aren't escaping out onto the road. We gave it its own drop-off because we had envisioned that was going to be a separate pickup and drop-off time and coordination than the rest of the school. So we kind of were looking at that as its own little independent piece. It doesn't necessarily have to go in that location. To get everybody to better understand what we designed there was we needed to respond to the ed spec that was written by the board in a short amount of time and come up with a building that I could give to professional cost estimators so that we could get a reasonable budget for you. So that's what we put together. It's still open for critique. If you have 3 or 4 pages of notes of critiques of the design, I have very thick skin. We design buildings all the time. So we would, so what you do at, you pass, you get the money, you get the building committee together, you start designing the building, you start critiquing the architect. Yeah, that's not a great idea, this is a better idea, and you work through those issues. Right now, that was our first servo at putting together a building of the size and scale. But I implore you, if you want to see buildings of that scale, take a ride up to South Windsor, take a ride over to Waterbury. There were folks on the original committee that we worked with that we asked them to go take a look at the building so you can just get a feel for the size of the buildings and how they operate, and break them down into little components. Does that answer the question?
It does. And also, Mike, I know that even when we got your renderings, the pictures, it's all on the website you might want to look at. I've shared that now at each faculty, right, and gotten feedback. And I've already talked to you about, hey, can we get bleachers in the gyms? This is important to us. Can we get a road connecting the two campuses so that we have one campus so that you can access both schools on one campus without having to go up the sidewalk on High Street? We've already talked about some of those things, and I know that that's really what contingency is for. As a building committee starts to get into the multi-million-dollar design phase, right? But would you suggest that it's important for us at this moment as a board to take Kim's 2 pages of notes and begin incorporating those into an ed specs plan for a building committee?
100%. It's exactly the process I would.
So to Kim or anybody, that now's the opportunity that you haven't approved in that stuff. If there are things like fencing for pre-K or security doors or how the space would look or what neighbors would see looking out their windows, right? That we should reflect those values and those needs in the ed spec plan. So it's not, we're not done, right? This is a part of the evolution, right?
100%. That's exactly.
Or the sound levels, using softer materials or whatever.
Yep. Yeah.
So those are
all of those adjectives should go into the
yeah.
ed spec. All the things that you think that students need. We'll talk about the students now. All the things that are important to educating the students in Portland, Connecticut should be in that ed spec because that's the treasure map that your architect and building committee are going to use to design your building and construct. So all of it. And it can be as long as you want it to be, but it's got to be in a certain format, and that's when you ask for the bonus money too, that we talk about.
And then, Mike, it's also fair to say, and I'm thinking back to our facility study committee, some of the concerns and experiences of people on that committee working in the profession were when you take an existing building and then retrofit it for a new need. In this case, we're designing for that need and not doing as much retrofitting, which opens doors to plan for the ergonomics, plan for the traffic flow in a more meaningful way rather than just fixing what you have, saving money, and then trying to cram and use it for a different purpose.
Right.
Mike, I have one more question. Was there anything put in, I don't remember seeing the road design on High Street for like a turn-only lane, whether it be at the school or at Ball Hill Road? Because everyone knows 70% of kids are driven to school in this town. Buses have 5 kids on them.
That's not quite true.
10, okay. Now you're taking the 2 schools on Main Street, their traffic, and it's all going to High Street, which is already busy just with the middle school and high school. And I understand it's going to be at 2 different times, but now you're going to have a 2.5 hour window of traffic instead of an hour window of traffic.
That's on page 2.
So there's going to be a turn lane at both locations?
Yeah, we broke it into three basic pieces, and then we gave you enough pavement in the estimate to be able to do a loop and parking off High Street, off of.
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong, this is just a rendering that you, or the architect firm and the building committee will take a year to come up with this final design.
That's correct.
So all these things that people bubble to the top can be incorporated in the new design with the architectural firm.
This is exactly that. Those renderings are to raise these questions,
Right.
and provide you a budget so that you can move at it. The state used to do it differently back in the day, but they were stuck with a bunch of bonded projects that never moved forward, and they didn't know what to do with authorized bonds, so let's do it this way now.
And to Bob's question about the will there be a turn only lane or not, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that one of the steps as we move forward, which is up first, open to state reimbursement, is a traffic study, which would help us determine whether there were changes needed on High Street in order to accommodate increased traffic flow. Is that accurate?
We had talked about a traffic study. I know this board had considered doing one preemptively, but I also thought it was also part of the project itself.
It will be reimbursable.
And reimbursable. So
Yeah.
yes, the traffic study would be done. I think we wanted to wait to see if the budget passed first before we talked about
Yeah,
other-
we get it.
other
We also talked about High Street last night at Water and Sewer, because we're looking at a line that's going down there, and the fact is, because it was at one time a state road, there's actually a wider taking line, so there's actually plenty of room if an extra lane needs to be put in. I think that they were talking about this basically an additional, 20 feet more than what you would normally have on the taking line for that road, so on either side. So there's room there.
Yeah, that'll be a lively discussion in the design phase. Just FYI, in the back of your head, I do a lot of work with what's reimbursable and what's not. If it's on the property, on the school property, you get paid for it. If it's in the right of way, the street right of way, you don't get paid for it. So we have to be very clever with how we widen that road if we're going to do something with that.
As long as we don't have to reimburse ourselves.
Tread lightly, but I'll just let you know. I'll let you know more as we move forward.
Any other thoughts from?
Well, I had 5 things that I had kind of written down, and 3 of them were already hit. That were good, but, there's a couple of things like operational things. I had a couple of questions, the same type of things in terms of student life. I looked at with the way that one cafeteria, and it looked like there's a 2.5-hour window, which means some kids are going to start eating lunch at 10:50 in the morning, and then that runs until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Is there, what's the capacity of the cafeteria from a serving standpoint? Is there a way to narrow that down so that, kids are eating at more of a lunchtime versus like almost like a brunch or,
So there is a lunch standard, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm curious of, and I think that ties in with, same thing, right, with the gym, and we've talked a little about this, looking at specials, and I know we've done as a district a good job with helping our kids. I think it's very helpful that we do what we do with music and the arts and all the things that we've stayed focused on. But again, we're gonna have one gym, it's gonna get a little bit of an enlargement from moving the stage, but, how is that gonna work? How often are kids gonna get those types of specials? Again, like student life, how is that will limit that? Other schools that I've been to that are more consolidated, which I prefer the term consolidated primary to mega school. I think we should all use it in our everyday.
Yes, thank you.
But
I like mega.
yeah, I'm going to say consolidated primary. Okay, I'm going to stick with that one. But and you would see that there was actually, for example, 2 basketball courts separated by a net, so you could actually have 2 different age groups in there doing something. I don't know, looking at the gym and what we're doing to the ed spec, there would be capacity for that, for space.
Yeah, so we looked at both of those questions. The gymnasium is designed to be divided in 2, so there's two stations simultaneously with a curtain.
Enough, for example, to say to support basketball sports?
A basketball court with the curtain open and with curtain closed, 2 gym classes.
Two half courts.
Yeah, 2 half courts. Yeah, kind of thing.
And how it's that?
Cafeteria, I believe, is designed, so what we do is 18 square foot per student. We take the entire student body and divide it by 4 for 4 waves. So 150 students per wave times 18 square foot per student. So that's kind of the way we thumb that size it at this point.
Okay, I thought we talked 5. I thought it was noted 5 waves last night.
Yeah, come on up.
Okay, Ryan, you gotta come to the podium, sorry. Come on up.
No, that's okay. Yeah, no, in that, you're absolutely correct. In that hypothetical schedule, there were 5 waves. I don't remember the specific time, I think it was 10:50.
10:50 was the start.
Yeah, and this is a lot of the conversation we had when we went out to look at some of the larger pre-K 5, South Windsor, I think they started at 10:30 in the morning and went until 1:30 in the afternoon, so that every grade level could have their own. I mean, they grew exponentially in the last couple of years. When we were in Ellington, I think they had 4 in their K-5 school, 3 or 4, because they did exactly what you just said. I mean, they literally, in some cases, they split grade level. So there's a lot of ways of doing that. And this is also looking at the hypothetical 5 sections, 5 classes per grade level. But we have grade levels that are 4 classes, we can combine them. So there's a lot of ways we can work around that.
Okay, and that actually, perfect segue, it led into the other question. When I looked at the plan, it looked like the classrooms were set for kind of a 5 sections per grade. How are we gonna, and we know that we've seen it with, our kindergarten also only needs 6 sections, it will need, right? And then that will run through, so that pulse will run through, that larger cohort will run through. How are we situated for all of the different grades to run through the school to accommodate the need for that extra sections? Or, for example, 2 sections as it pulse through the school?
No, that's a great question. So each one of those, we talked about neighborhoods last time, and there's the sections of the school, whether there's a 4th and 5th grade section, which is the hallway that leads down to the specials, the gym, the 2nd and 3rd grade being upstairs, and then the kindergarten and 1st grade being in the other wing of the school. And within each of those wings, for example, the 4th and 5th grade, there are 11 possible classrooms there. One of them could be a choir or a band room just because of its location, but if it was a year where we had 6 4th grades or 6 5th grades, we could expand that. There are also there are several smaller spaces that are, I'll call them resource rooms that compete for either a reading specialist, a special education teacher. So there's some capacity there to flex if we need to as well. But each one of those sections, if I'm thinking correctly, has each of those neighborhoods, if you will, has 11 classrooms that are available for some of that expansion.
Yeah, and in general, where we mostly run into 6 sections, like this year, we will have 6 sections of kindergarten, 6 sections of 1st grade, 6 sections of 2nd grade. But then, as we go up in the grades, we're comfortable with the class sizes getting larger because the students aren't developmentally needing very small classes. Like, we try to make our classes 15 to 18 in the younger grades, but we're comfortable going into the low 20s as we get to 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. That's why the whole time I've been here, there's only ever been 5 sections of 5th and 5 sections of 6th, because at that developmental level, you're comfortable at 23 students a class. You don't want to get to 25. But 23 is a sweet spot there. It's the younger grades where we like that extra section because the developmental needs of the students are such that they need that level of supervision.
Yeah, and you get the balancing act, right? If you overbuild to be able to accommodate too much, then you run into what we ran into years ago where the state said, well, you have too much space, so and not enough students. So I understand the balancing act. I looked at the numbers saying, 575 to basically 650, right, is the swing. We want to make sure we're good up to that 650 number because.
Yeah, we would, the design specs called for Prouda's first study had a high of 648. His second study, I want to be honest, was lower. But I'm going to make the argument to the state that we stick with the 648 number because of the effect that Prouda didn't account for of the Brainerd Place, and that is going to bring in somewhere in the neighborhood, we've done some homework recently, of 18 to 25 students. So we have to plan for that. So that's going to be my argument to the state. I'm going to be very transparent about it and say that we had 2 studies done. First study had us at 648. The second study had us a little lower. I don't see us going above 648. Mike, in you're looking at this, what's the number? 800, 850? I'm going way up there now. That we would be at like, oh boy, time to go to the expansion option because we would outgrow that school.
I honestly have to get back to you on that.
Yeah, right? But 648, don't forget, that's the highest number projected over the next 10 years. Now again, anything can happen, and anybody rewinding this tape someday, if we become like South Windsor, because an affinity grouping comes in here and our numbers go up, well, that's part of why we asked Fryer to show us in this blocking diagram where the areas for expansion are. Now, yes, that's a challenge because kids are going to be there and we don't have any more swing space, and new construction would require new bonding and new classrooms to be added while kids are there. And, we'd be bringing in portable classrooms and putting them on the soccer field down below to do that. That wouldn't be great. But at that point, Portland would have changed dramatically, right? Like South Windsor did. And we would be in a very different kind of place. I don't see that happening, but I don't know if anybody predicted the baby boom either, right? Right now, we can only work with the numbers we've got. The 10-year projection calls for a high of 648, which is what Mike used for the design specs.
What was the number in the other study? You said it was
611.
611, so really not that big of a difference.
And that's why I'm going to say we're sticking with the original study at 648 because of the effect of Brandon, which Brian and I have recently done a little work with Bertram and compared Middletown, Glastonbury, and Brookfield, and that's the number that we're seeing. But again, based on Portland's history, I'm going to be very clear, highlight bold in our application that, it's not hundreds over.
Right.
The difference between 648 and 611 and the effect of Brandon Place, I think we get back to 648 pretty quickly.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from any board members? We do have a public comment portion of the meeting as well. I just want to remind everyone, and I don't know if we're coming to a consensus tonight or just.
Well, can I make a comment, Brian? Do you mind if I just?
Sure.
What Stephanie and I mean, right, is have to understand. So the last part that Mike's going to help us with is this grant application. Stephanie and I have been in touch with the state. The grant application is now open. We've started looking at it. We're studying it. I promise you that Stephanie and I are going to write the best grant that state has ever gotten. Right? I will get an A+ on that grant. It will be well written. It will be clear. It will be backed up with data and 4 years worth of work. Right? The state is never going to see anything so comprehensive as what I'm going to submit to them. It's also going to be a lot of work. Right? Stephanie and I are going to be spending many hours doing this the right way. Okay, that grant is due June 30th. It's May 15th, right? So Stephanie and I have got 6 weeks to do this, and we're prepared. Like, I'm clearing my calendar, and we're going to do this, right? What I need tonight, in some way, whether it's kind of thumbs up or something, Charles, we got you. Get going on writing the grant, because it's going to be a little disappointing if we do all of this work and then either the ed specs isn't approved or a motion isn't set for November, both being Exhibit A and Exhibit B, Appendix A and Appendix A, that need to go in that work. So I'm kind of looking tonight, and I know Stephanie is too, like, is it Charles, get working? And then Friar's going to help us. We're going to be working with bond counsel on the Board of Selectmen side of this and be heading towards, before June 30th, that motion towards getting this out in front of the voters in November. And on the Board of Ed side, we've seen your ed specs. We may have a few notes for it based on these 2 pages of Kim's, but we're heading towards that direction, get going. Or now's not the right time. We need to not, we're not going to hit that June 30th deadline. Charles, go focus on your end of year work that you have to do, and are you reading between the lines? Like,
yes.
I'm sort of asking for Charles, Stephanie, take on this big extra project, which I'm happy to do, or not.
I don't think financially we should wait longer. Because like we said, if we don't make June 30th, we don't make the referendum in November, and it's pushed off another year, everything's just going to cost more if the public approves it. So I don't see why we wouldn't push it forward.
And the schools will continue to fall apart.
Yeah, I keep thinking about when I look at we talked about the numbers, and it's the annualized savings, right, of a consolidated primary and the operational savings. If you look at and you put that against this year's budget, depending on whether you go with the 1 million, right, if we haven't been able to move the old schools right away, or the 1.2, that's 2.5% to 3% of our budget. So those savings are significant when you look at
over the next 30 years of operating our schools. So to me, and I also agree, if we wait, it's only going to get more expensive. We saw that with the park on Route 17. You had that lag time with referendum, and things got more expensive in the interim. It was harder to meet those targets. So, can you just run that? Just so I got you, the ed spec. You write the ed spec for the grade, correct?
No, the ed spec is written.
Okay.
The Board of Education needs to approve it.
And then you'll start writing the grant.
I'm gonna, if I walk out of here tonight with a pretty
Approved.
strong sense of inferencing, I'm pretty good at inferring that, Charles, go write your grant. Stephanie and I are going to meet tomorrow morning. We're going to fist bump one time, and then we're going to get working. Like we have a huge grant to write. We got to get going on it.
And that needs to be in by
June 30th.
June 30th.
Approved ed spec plan and a approved from Board of Selectmen bonding question. Mike, correct me?
And 3 resolutions, which I'll share with, if you guys want to move ahead, I will share what those resolutions are. It's a series of resolutions that are part of, one from the money side and one from the education side that come together as part of the grant.
Right, so 3 resolutions prior to June 29th and an approved ed spec plan.
And a bunch of letters and stuff like that.
And we can start writing, like Stephanie and I can start drafting, which we will do.
And then you submit those. And what's the next step?
Then we might go radio silent, can't advocate. Whether people in town want to start putting out their yard signs or doing what they're going to do to muster the yes or no votes, we don't influence that decision aside from providing information, correct? Once those resolutions are passed?
So the resolution doesn't kick off the silent period. The town meeting that adjourns to a referendum is what starts the silent period.
So we have to approve a referendum for.
Correct. So you meet with bond council, you'll get your language, you will make a vote to move it to referendum. That meeting adjourns, and technically it's an open meeting until the referendum.
And that's all before June 30th when the application is deadline.
Correct.
Yeah.
So we'd be busy 6 weeks. And then the silent period starts and people in town begin their advocacy or lack thereof campaigns, and we wait to see who our next president and school district direction is.
And then if this grant is approved, we're on a school building wait list, correct? If this grant is approved after the referendum, if the referendum is yes, the grant will be approved by the state. We get on a build list, correct?
So yes, so
something like that.
So they receive all the grants. They decide what the priority list is for the year. You guys will be kind of on this probation until November. If it passes in December, that list of towns that have passed a referendum, have money in place, and have their grant approved by the state goes to bond council in December to vote on. And then it goes to legislation in the spring, and then it is approved by July 1st. You can start spending the funds for construction at that point. I think what we would want to do is get the architects on board and get moving right after referendum.
Stephanie, I saw you were.
Stephanie, please come up. Stephanie, please come.
You can't avoid it.
When you're talking about the silent period, once we find out what our percentage is, because the state was pretty firm that like right as soon as they find out, they'll let us know because they know the situation we're in. Can we tell that to people? I know when you say a silent part, like, can we then say, okay, our reimbursement is going to be 50%? Can we say that?
That is an absolute question for bond council. I don't know exactly how that's going to play out. Yeah. You may be able to move a question that says we're going to let you know what that final number is as soon as the state gives it to us on July 1st. I would reach out to bond council almost immediately if this moves forward and ask those questions, because that's attorney questions? I don't want to speak from stuff that's not in my wheelhouse.
But Stephanie, your question was, can we share information once the silent period starts? And my understanding is that yes, we can share factual information. We cannot participate as a body.
Cannot advocate.
We cannot advocate one way or the other, but we can share information.
Yeah, that's really what they're looking at, is the advocacy as they go through the language. Make sure you're not going to get it right.
So I think I'm hearing Charles and Stephanie have a paper to write. We have our homework.
Yeah. Go forth and write the best way forward.
It will be amazing, I promise you.
Well, before we move on, we still have public comment. I think it's important to not lose sight of that as well. And also, we do have a Board of Education member and a Board of Selectmen member not here tonight as well. So I think we have a direction that we're heading, but I do think it is wise to also listen to the other members too. As far as procedurally, when would the Board of Education, I guess my question is, when would you be taking up the question to approve the Ed Spec plan?
Our next Board of Ed meeting is the 21st, and I anticipate that will be an agenda item.
And so we would then follow your lead, I would say, but our second meeting of the month is actually tomorrow evening. And so I would most likely advise that either we hold the Board of Selectmen would hold a special meeting, or we wait till our June 5th meeting.
So my understanding is you're going to want to meet with bond counsel before you have that meeting in order to craft the language and get the correct numbers, right?
I'll be calling bond counsel tomorrow, and
So,
I've already spoken with bond counsel about this already quite a bit, but just the fact that it appears closer to moving to a question. So yeah.
But so all I'm saying is if you needed to wait until your first June meeting, I think that's still acceptable timeline-wise for the grant to proceed.
Yeah. And Mike's
right?
going to get us the resolution languages, the 3 resolutions. We can get it. I already sent them. There we go. So Stephanie and I can start drafting.
Now, another question I have is, we did talk about in your presentation, you had asked about whether the town wanted a second question regarding the HVAC and the secondary schools. I'm assuming it would be the same timetable as well, so that would have to be decided very soon if the town is going to consider it.
So Stephanie and I know that that's a different application. The way it worked the past 2 years is that application window, Stephanie, opened in September and closed on Halloween, right? That's not there, but there's not a June 30th deadline for the HVAC grant. So that would be, I would consider, maybe we do that as like a summer fall project.
We'd still be bonding it though, I guess, so we'd definitely talk with bond counsel now then about it, I would say. But I get what you're saying, it's a different deadline.
Right, yeah, it's different. Yes.
Even if you're doing it for a referendum in November and June and December, would you have to?
I think what Brian's saying is it would be a second question. Question 1, 66 million for the consolidated elementary school. Bond question 2, 1.5 million with an estimated reimbursement rate of 50% for HVAC, air handling units, and deionization systems.
And there's no rush to approve that question like there is for the school consolidation. That's the point. You have quite a bit longer to worry about that.
Yeah. I'm seeing shaking heads from Mike.
Okay, this one is. It's just defined as a priority project and a non-priority project. It's just a legislative language. The priority projects are these big school projects. So those are the ones that have the June 30th deadline, and those are the ones that state bonds. The other ones are non-priority projects: roofs, oil tanks, removals. These HVAC grants are non-priority projects. Doesn't mean they're not. Don't misunderstand the word non-priority. They're still a priority, but they're just come out of a different source of money from the state. So it's a different legislative process for them. That's why they're named that.
All right. If everyone's okay, we'll open public comment.
Yeah.
So before we start with the public comment here today, I do want to acknowledge, I know the Board of Selectmen members have been receiving, I've been receiving quite a bit of correspondence from Portland residents in support and against the proposal that we're talking about. So I don't want to, I think to read each one of these into the record may be time consuming, but I should maybe summarize each one. So I have an email from Elizabeth Krzyjanowski, who lives at 77 Old Marlboro Turnpike, who is writing in support of the consolidated elementary school plan. I have an email from Julie McGovern, who lives at 113 Mishamisek Trail, who is writing in support to endorse the proposed plan of a consolidated elementary school. I have an email from Jen Kiopin, I hope I pronounced that right, Capon at 108 High Street, who is writing to endorse, for us to endorse the proposed plan for consolidating the 3 elementary schools. I have an email from Alicia Holloway at 24 Foley Road, who is writing us to express her support for the proposed consolidated elementary school. I have an email from Ingrid Swanson, who, let me just see, because this is a vote of non-support for proceeding with the consolidated plan at this time. And I don't know if I have an address on this.
Main Street.
Main Street. Oh, okay. And I think those are the emails. Beth, did you want me to read your email and print it? Yeah. Okay. Let me just pull that up because I meant to respond to yours because yours was more of a question than a statement.
Yeah, if it's easier, I'll use your public comment.
Okay, if you don't mind. Yeah, I should have printed yours as well. I apologize. So those are, and then we'll open it up to public comment in the audience first.
So the Board of Ed has actually received 2 additional emails this evening. The first was from Aaron Leibensparger at 247 Middle Haddam Road, writing to ask boards to please endorse the proposed plan for consolidation, and a second letter from Nancy Leibensparger, also at 247 Middle Haddam Road, who as a grandparent is writing to endorse the plan for consolidation.
I think I saw that come in. I'd already left, but thank you. All right, so public comment.
Waiting all night for this moment. Jen Ritchie, I live at 21 Cody Lane. First, I want to say thank you so much for the conversation that I heard tonight. I feel very hopeful for this consolidated school plan. I am a teacher here in town. I teach 2nd grade at Gildersleeve. And actually, Kim, I wanted to just share something with you, a thought that I had, in addition to my support of Portland. I was a teacher the first 15 years of my career in Newington, and I was in a pre-K-4 building. And one of the things that we did to really bring our school community together was something called school families, and I would love to see us do this. And the way school families worked is each person who worked in the building, whether that was a para, a specials teacher, a classroom teacher, building principal, everyone had a school family. And then there would maybe be like 2 kindergartners, 2 first graders, 2 second graders, all the way through. And then that became your family. And we met once a month, and we did like SEL type lessons on social emotional learning, how to be a good member of our school community, how we support each other, and we came up with like these secret little like hand signals that we would do in the hallway and everything. And I think that, you know, I understand the trepidation of having this giant school because we're such a small town and it's such a close-knit community. I was on my way here and I saw someone I knew pulling out of DQ, and it was like a big, hey, you know, and hey, back, and I love that about this town. And I think that there are some amazing, dedicated teachers who are fully in support of this plan, and we will do everything that we can to maintain that neighborhood feel to keep Portland schools feeling small while still being in one building together. And one major culture shock for me when I came to Portland was the fact that I was not able to talk to easily kindergarten and first grade teachers about students in my second grade classroom. And I really miss that collegiality. And I mean, we feel it as educators, we're in different buildings and we might as well be on different islands and different planets many times. I know Jen has something to say about Spirit Weeks going on. There are so many compelling reasons for this one school plan. I'm happy to go on a long list, but I'll keep it brief. But I just think that there are things that we can do culturally to support a small feel, and school families is a great example of that. So, thank you.
Hi, my name is Jen Pickett. I live at 22 Fox Run Road. I also teach second grade at Gildersleeve. But just as importantly, I have 2 kids of my own, a kindergartner and a 5th grader. So I span Valley View. I teach at Gildersleeve, and I'm a BIS. I cover K through 5 in my household. Right now, there's an alphabet countdown happening at Valley View. There's a Spirit Week happening at BIS. And I'm getting daily emails from my students' parents. What Spirit Week day is it? We're not having a Spirit Week. It's just things like that that are driving parents crazy. Just little things like that. I talk to a lot of people because I have a kid at Valley View and a kid at Biz. Parents are not just in support of this. We're so excited about it. We cannot wait for our children to spend K through 5 in the same building with the same teachers, with a kindergarten teacher that can check in on a 5th grader and say like, wow, I've known you for 5 years. That makes us so excited as educators and as parents. It's gonna do wonders for our sense of community. We're putting together these smart wings that feel like neighborhoods. Listening to this meeting tonight, thank you for making it make financial sense for us to stop pouring money into these buildings that are falling apart. It makes educational sense. It's great for parents. Thank you for deciding to put it for the vote. We're excited about it. Like Portland is excited. Thanks.
Beth Anderson, 44 West Cotton Hill Road. I as well am a parent. Unfortunately, my child is going to school at St. John Paul II. We only spent half of kindergarten at Valley View and decided to move over. I'm actually very much in support of doing the consolidated school. He has had a very great success in St. John Paul II with their first grade through 8th grade all being in one building and working as a buddy system. There's a lot of continuity of with the teaching, teachers talking with each other. The kids get to know the next year's teachers. They often will do a day in the next classroom before they get to move on, so they know what to expect, have a happier summer vacation, and things like that. So, despite my child not being in the Portland schools, I as a taxpayer am happy to spend a little extra money. Ideally not a ton of extra money, but am willing to commit extra money because I realize it is going to help the value of the Portland education system, which is value to our residents, as well as helping our property values. So I am supportive of it, but I am very much concerned that we are transparent, or that you guys are transparent with the taxpayers of Portland. Again, letting them know in advance that there could be another $11 million coming down the road in a couple of years that you're going to want to obtain bond funding for. And the other thing that I was concerned about, and I've already spoken with Dr. Britton about it, was one of the slides from the prior presentation that showed the comparison of the numbers of savings between the consolidated schools, the maintain what we have, and the do nothing. And the metrics are a little screwy, pardon my phrasing there, in the sense that one is a total column and the others are total. One is a net column and the others are total columns. So you end up comparing a little bit of apples to oranges. And I don't have my whiteboard or chalkboard here to do the math lesson. But what I have had in my own personal experience is that I can't say I'm saving this here and I'm expending this here and having find those balance, and I can't wrap my head around how that works. So you end up in the consolidated school, you're saving the $57 million in the overhead costs of the extra staff and personnel. However, in the do nothing and the maintaining, putting the money into the schools, you're adding that $57 million. So I feel like that is not being fully transparent. In my world, I tried to, in one of the conversations with Dr. Britton, we were talking about, okay, let's put this in the terms of cars. If we think about, I actually went through this equation recently, 3 really old cars that need a lot of work. They're gas cars, diesel cars. Yeah, they suck up some money and extra expense there. So say I'm putting $1,000 a year in gas, and Lord knows how much to maintain that. So I can go out and buy a new electric car. What great rebates now, let's figure $35,000 on a new electric car, but I'm saving on the gas. But am I putting that money back in my pocket? No, I'm not putting it in, but I'm not spending it. So it's not going out, but it's not going in. And we have to keep that in mind, and I don't think that transparency is evident on that slide. And so I'm support, but please be transparent.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to comment before we move on? Before we move on to online, I did find another letter. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Lou Bear's letter that he wrote to both boards of selectmen and education. I believe this is from Lou and Marion Pear. And so Lou did not really, I think the letter, to sum up, was not against the proposal. It was against doing nothing. And that was what this is. He does not want us to do anything or just the capital improvements. I think Lou and the Facilities Study Committee, which did a terrific job, had discussed the decommissioning of just Gildersleeve. And so I believe Lou is mentioning that as a proposal, but also saying that this would work as well as a viable option. So thank you to Lou and Mary. Anyone online?
Can you ask them to send a message to speak? We don't have anybody yet, but I want to make sure that.
Sure. If anyone is online and would like to comment publicly on the school facilities project that we've been discussing tonight, please send a message via Zoom to our admin. Great.
Hi, good evening. My name is Beth Mann. I live at 244 Summer Street. I have a 5th grader at Biz. I'm 100% in support of the merge of the schools. As I think about the last 5 years of his school experience is the constant transition from school to school, and we know that transition is hard for young kids, and so the fact that we've been through 3 schools since we've been in kindergarten is a hard transition. I want to commend Jen Witchy, what she said about the Jen and the community of all being in one school, knowing our kids, even if they're in 1st grade, the 4th grade teachers know who our kids are. The fact that teachers can communicate, I felt like some of the transitions from the different schools, the needs of some of our children were not communicated as much, so to be able to have that communication between teachers. And also, again, this is a small town, we all know each other. Some of our peers are teachers of our children, and we've established just amazing relationships in school and out of school. And so I think that having all the children in one school is just going to make such a better for our community. And thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Yes, we have Jessica.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, Jessica.
Hi, Jessica Rosenthal. I live at 8 Edwards Road in Portland. Overall, I do want to say that I am in favor of the school consolidation plan. I do have two kids affected by this. My son Mark will be in first grade next year, and then I have my son Luca, who currently is at First Church, who will be going to kindergarten in 2 years. One of the things I do want to encourage the Board of Education and selectmen to do is to really understand the impact that this construction will have on the community as a whole. Valley View is not just used as a site for education for our pre-K through first grade, but the fields are also used by our Little League. We do have to plan for that, and while the proposal looks beautiful, I just want to make sure that we're planning appropriately to make the least impact to our children as we go through this transition. But again, in support, I'm excited overall to be in one school, but I do have some reservations and concerns, and I look forward to hearing more information as we learn more about the plan going forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Is there anyone else that wishes to comment online? Okay. Give it one more second. All right. Well, with that, the next item on the agenda is to adjourn the meeting. So I'll entertain
I make a motion we adjourn.
All right. Motion's been made and seconded. All those